The market was full of noise and movement. Traders shouted the prices of fruits and metals. Children ran between the stalls, laughing and playing. The air carried the smell of cooked food, mixed with smoke from burning wood. Among the crowd, one figure stood out, a human traveler. He walked calmly, his clothes dusty from a long journey, but his eyes alert, scanning everything. On his left hand, a ring shone in the sunlight. It was simple in design, but strange in feeling. The metal looked old, almost ancient, yet it glowed softly as if it carried its own light. Most people ignored it. To them, it was just another piece of decoration. But one pair of eyes froze the moment they saw it. An elderly alien woman, her skin pale and marked with lines of age, stood near a fruit stall. She was bent with years, her shoulders weak, but her eyes were sharp and alive. The moment she noticed the ring, her breath caught. Her heart beat faster, as if a memory long buried had suddenly been dragged back into the light. She followed the human with slow, trembling steps. Her hands shook as she clutched her cloak tighter around her. She could not believe what she was seeing. That ring, she had seen it before, decades ago, on the finger of someone she had loved more than life itself. The human paused at a stall selling old tools. He lifted one, examined it, and began to bargain with the shopkeeper. At that moment, the woman finally gathered the courage to step closer. Her voice cracked, weak from both age and emotion. Where did you get that ring?" The human turned, surprised. He had expected a normal greeting or maybe a request for trade, but not such a direct question. He looked down at the woman. Her eyes were locked onto his hand. She wasn't looking at his face, his clothes, or his pack, only at the ring. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply stared back, trying to understand her sudden interest. "This ring?" he finally asked, lifting his hand so she could see it more clearly. The woman's lips trembled. She nodded, but no words came. Her throat tightened as tears threatened to form. "Yes," she whispered. "That ring? Please tell me where it came from." The human hesitated. He was not used to questions like this. He had found the ring years ago in a place he rarely spoke of. A place covered in silence and death. The memory pressed at the edges of his mind, heavy and dark. "Why do you ask?" he replied carefully. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of unease in it. The woman's body shook. Her legs almost gave way, and she clutched the wooden stall beside her for support. "Because I know that ring. I knew the one who wore it. Long ago." The human's eyes narrowed. He studied her face, the pain etched into every line, the desperate hope in her gaze. This was not the look of someone curious about treasure. This was the look of someone chasing a ghost from the past. The market noise around them seemed to fade. The shouting of traders, the laughter of children, the clatter of tools, all of it became distant, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The human and the alien woman stood locked in that moment, strangers bound by something neither fully understood. "I found it," the human finally said. His voice was low, almost reluctant, in a place where no one should have been. A battlefield, abandoned and silent. "I don't know why I kept it, but when I saw it I felt something," the woman gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth as if to hold back a cry. A battlefield. Her heart twisted at the word. For her, that word was not just a memory. It was a wound that had never healed. Her voice broke. "Which battlefield? Tell me. Please." The human looked away for a moment. He seemed to be deciding whether to speak or stay silent. His jaw tightened. "The plains beyond Arvalis Ridge," he said at last. "Among the ruins of the Great War." The woman's knees gave way and she almost collapsed. Only the stall kept her from falling. Her eyes filled with tears. "Arvalis. My husband. He vanished there." Her words were broken by sobs. "That ring?" It was his. The human froze. His hand with the ring lowered slowly to his side. A cold weight settled in his chest. He had worn this ring without knowing, without understanding the pain tied to it. Now the truth pressed against him like a blade. People around them began to notice. Some glanced curiously. Others moved away, sensing something heavy in the air. The human ignored them. His gaze stayed on the woman, who looked at him as though he held the last piece of her shattered heart. For the first time in years, the human felt unsure of what to do. He had faced storms, battles, and loneliness, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, for the question of an old woman whose life had been marked by loss. And so he stood there, silent, with only one thought echoing in his mind. Why did fate put this ring on his hand? And why now? The answer would come, but not yet. The hook was set and the story had only just begun. The human did not answer right away. His eyes shifted away from the trembling woman and focused on the ring. For years he had carried it without knowing its true history, but the moment she spoke of her husband, the memories he had tried to bury began to rise like smoke from dying fire. He took a slow breath and said softly, "You want to know where I found it? Then you must hear the truth. But the truth is not easy." The woman nodded quickly, wiping her tears with shaking hands. Her voice was faint. "Tell me. Even if it hurts, I must know." The human's gaze became distant, as if he was no longer in the market but far away, standing once again in the ruins of a forgotten war. It had been many years ago. He was younger then, a soldier without a home, moving wherever war demanded. The battle at Arvalis Ridge had ended weeks before he arrived. By then the ground was already soaked in silence. The battlefield was not filled with soldiers anymore, only ashes, broken weapons, and memories that no one wanted to remember. He walked through the ruined land with heavy boots, the dust rising in small clouds. The wind carried the smell of burned machines and decayed bodies. The sky above was gray, thick with smoke that never seemed to leave. No birds sang there. No life dared to return. The human had gone there not for treasure but for answers. He had lost his own comrades in the chaos of the war, and something had pulled him toward that place as if he might find closure. He searched among shattered helmets and rusted armor. Each piece told a story of someone who had fought and fallen. Sometimes he paused, bowing his head in silence before moving on. It was near the edge of a collapsed trench that he saw it, the glint of metal half buried in the dirt. At first he thought it was just a fragment of a weapon, but when he knelt down and brushed away the soil, he found a hand. A skeletal hand, its bones weathered, clutching tightly onto something. The human's breath caught. He carefully freed the object. And there it was, the ring. It was not shiny like gold nor carved like a jewel, but it radiated something else, weight, history, almost presence. The moment his fingers closed around it, he felt a pulse, faint like the beating of a distant heart. He remembered whispering to himself, "Why would a soldier cling so hard to this?" He slipped the ring from the skeletal finger and held it up. For a moment, the battlefield seemed quieter. He almost thought he heard a voice, a whisper in a language he did not understand. But when he looked around, there was only silence and death. From that day forward, he kept it. He could not explain why. Many times he had thought of throwing it away, leaving it where it belonged, but something always stopped him. Whenever he faced danger, the ring seemed to warm slightly, as if reminding him he was not alone. Sometimes, in dreams, he saw flashes, an alien man standing tall, his hand resting on the shoulder of a woman with kind eyes, children laughing. Then fire, smoke, and battle. He never understood why those images came to him. Until today. The human blinked, returning from memory to the present. The market sounds returned around him, but the weight of the battlefield still hung on his shoulders. He looked at the old woman, who was staring at him with wide, tearful eyes. She had not spoken once during his story, but her expression revealed everything. Each word had struck her heart like a blade. He spoke gently. "I found it there, in the ruins of Arvalis Ridge. A soldier's hand was clutching it even in death. I thought it belonged to him now. I think I was wrong." The woman covered her mouth, her body trembling. Her knees bent slightly as if the memory of her husband's last stand had struck her down. "My husband," she whispered. "He fought there. He swore he would never surrender. They told me his body was never found." Her eyes filled with tears, but behind the tears was something else. Recognition. She looked at the ring not as metal, but as a piece of her lost life, finally returned. The human lowered his hand, the ring glinting softly. For years it had been his burden. Now he felt it was never meant for him alone. It was a thread connecting him to this woman, to her past, and perhaps to something much larger than both of them. He did not know why fate had chosen him to find it. But in that moment, as the old woman's tears fell onto the dusty ground, he knew one thing. The ring carried a story not yet finished, and for the first time he feared that story was only beginning. The old woman's hand shook as she reached for the ring, though she did not dare touch it. Her eyes never left the human's hand. as if the small band of metal held her entire life inside it. For years she had dreamed of this moment, of seeing even the smallest trace of him. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. That ring, it belonged to my husband. Let me tell you about him. The human stood silently. Around them, the noise of the market continued. Shouting voices, footsteps, the clink of coins, but to him it all sounded distant. He knew what was about to be shared would not be a simple memory. It would be a wound old but still bleeding. Her voice began low, shaky, but as the story unfolded it grew stronger, carried by the weight of truth. He was not just a soldier, she said. He was a protector. Our people were divided when the war came. Some wanted to run, others wanted to fight, but he believed that our home was worth defending even if it cost him everything. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering. The picture of him rose before her. The tall alien man with firm shoulders, kind eyes, and a laugh that filled their small home. He wore that ring on the day we married. It was simple, not made of jewels or gold, but it meant more than any treasure. It was a promise that no matter what, he would come back to me. Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. When the war grew darker and the enemies pushed deeper into our lands, he refused to hide. He volunteered for the front lines. I begged him not to go. I begged him for the sake of our children. But he only smiled and said, "If I do not stand, then who will?" The human felt his chest tighten. The words echoed the whispers he had once thought were dreams. Now he realized they were fragments of this man's spirit reaching out through the ring. The woman's tears finally fell. They rolled slowly down her wrinkled cheeks, each drop heavy with years of sorrow. The last time I saw him was at the gates of Arvalis. He kissed my forehead, placed his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Wait for me." I waited. I waited through the long nights of bombing, through the endless days of silence, through the messages that never came. They told me he was missing, but never dead. They never found his body. Part of me believed he was alive, wandering, searching for a way back. Another part knew the truth, I just refused to say it aloud. Her breathing quickened. She pressed a hand against her chest as if her heart ached too much to continue, but the words still came. My children grew without a father. I grew old waiting for news. But nothing ever came. Only shadows. Only silence. Until today. She pointed a trembling finger at the ring. That is the only proof left of him. That is the piece of his soul. And now I see it on your hand. You do not know what it means for me to see it again after all these years. The human did not move. He listened, heavy with guilt and awe. He had thought the ring was just a relic, maybe a soldier's token, but now he understood. It was love, devotion, sacrifice, all wrapped into one band of metal. He remembered the visions, the whispers, the warmth. They were not random. They were echoes of a man who had refused to die quietly. The ring had carried his will through time until it ended up with him. The old woman wiped her face, trying to hide her tears but failing. Her voice lowered, trembling once more. "Tell me, human, why did it find you? Why not someone else? Why not one of my people?" The human had no answer. He stared at the ring, feeling its weight more than ever. He wanted to speak, but no words came. All he could think was that fate had chosen him, though he did not know why. The woman leaned closer, her eyes burning with desperate hope. Did he suffer? Did the battlefield take him quickly? Or did he hold on? The human's throat tightened. He remembered the skeletal hand still clutching the ring, the iron grip even in death. Slowly, he answered. He held on. Even when everything was gone, even when the world was ash, he held on. I think he wanted this ring to survive. For you, the old woman gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Her body shook as sobs broke free. For decades she had imagined how he died. Now she knew. He had fought to the last breath, never letting go of his promise. The market crowd began to whisper, some watching, others moving away. But the human and the old woman stood in their own world, tied by the memory of a man who had once lived, loved, and fallen for something greater. The human lowered his gaze, his voice quiet. Your husband's story is not finished. His ring carried him to me. And maybe it carries something else. A message. The woman lifted her eyes, wet and shining, staring at him as if waiting for the next revelation. She was no longer simply an old woman in a market. In that moment, she was a widow standing before the legacy of her lost love. And deep inside the human, a new fear formed. The ring was more than memory. It was purpose. and that purpose was now his. The human stood silently, the weight of the old woman's story pressing on his chest like a stone. For years, the ring had been his alone. It had comforted him in lonely nights and given him courage in dark battles. But now, hearing the truth, he began to wonder if he had stolen something that was never meant for him. His fingers tightened around the band. It felt heavier now, as if the truth itself had made the metal dense. The old woman's tear-streaked face watched him with pleading eyes. "It is his!" "It is my husband's. It belongs with me," she whispered. Her voice cracked, fragile like thin glass. The human's lips pressed into a hard line. His mind was torn in two. Part of him wanted to slip it off and place it in her hands immediately. She had waited all her life, suffered all her years without answers. Returning it to her would be the honorable thing, but another part of him resisted. The ring had not been silent in his life. It had spoken in whispers and dreams. It had warmed against his skin in moments of danger, almost guiding him. What if it had chosen him for a reason? What if taking it off meant losing something far bigger than both of them? He lowered his gaze, avoiding her eyes. "I don't know what to do." Memories of the battlefield returned sharper than before, the skeletal hand refusing to let go. The strange warmth when he first wore it. The nights when he dreamed of voices not his own. The vision of children laughing, of a woman crying, of a man standing tall against fire. Were these visions just his imagination? Or were they messages left behind? The human rubbed the ring slowly with his thumb as if trying to read its secrets through touch. His heart pounded with unease. He had survived battles he should not have survived. He had escaped traps where no soldier ever walked out, and each time the ring had pulsed, faint but certain. Could it be coincidence? Or was he carrying more than just a dead man's memory? The old woman stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. "You do not understand, human. That ring is the last piece of him I will ever have. Please give it to me." Her words cut deep. He looked into her eyes and saw decades of pain. A widow's grief hardened into stone. But beneath it there was also something else, expectation. She truly believed he would hand it over. The human's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, but his voice failed. Instead, he looked away at the ground beneath their feet, at the people in the market who were pretending not to stare but listening all the same. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed. Ashamed of keeping something that was never his, ashamed of not knowing if he deserved it. But then another thought pierced his doubt. If he gave it back, would it silence the visions forever? Would the strange bond between him and the unseen spirit vanish? What if the ring had not been meant to return to the widow but to carry on its owner's purpose? The whisper of memory stirred inside him again like a faint echo. "If I fall, protect them." His head lifted slightly. The hidden engraving they had seen earlier in the band, it was not a farewell. It was an order, a mission. And somehow the ring had passed that mission to him. The human clenched his jaw. If the husband had truly wanted the ring to return home, then why had fate guided it into his hands instead? Why had it not been lost forever on the battlefield, buried with the body? The more he thought, the more uneasy he became. The old woman's voice pulled him back. "Human, why do you hesitate? Do you not see my pain?" He finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "I see it, and I respect it. But this ring, it is not just a memory. It has been more than that. It has spoken to me." The woman blinked, stunned. "Spoken?" He nodded slowly. "Not in words I understand, but in dreams, in feelings, in protection. I have worn it through battles where no one should have survived. And each time I felt him, your husband, or something of him." The woman's lips parted in shock. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were mixed with confusion. "You mean, he has been with you all this time?" The human's gaze dropped to the ring. "I don't know, but I can't deny it anymore. There is something in this ring that wants me to continue carrying it." The crowd around them grew restless. Whispers spread. A cursed ring, a soldier's spirit, a human who claimed to speak to the dead. Some people stepped back, others leaned closer, hungry for the story. The human ignored them. His mind was a battlefield of its own. Duty to the grieving woman clashed with the pull of destiny in his heart. His doubt grew sharper with every breath. Was he being selfish? Or was he being chosen? At last he looked back at her, his eyes shadowed with conflict. "I do not know if I can give it up. Not yet. There is something unfinished, something I must understand. Until then, I cannot return it." The old woman's face fell. Her knees shook and she turned away, covering her face in both hands, and the human felt his own heart crack with guilt. But deep inside, beyond the guilt, another feeling whispered, purpose. The old woman lowered her hands slowly, her eyes still wet with tears. She looked at the human, disappointment and sorrow fighting in her expression. If you will not give it to me, then at least show me. Let me hold it, even once. Let me see if it still remembers me. The human hesitated. His fingers brushed the ring, feeling its familiar warmth. For years it had clung to him like a second skin, but after a long pause he slipped it off. The metal felt heavy in his palm, heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Carefully he held it out to her. The woman's hands trembled as she took it. Her body shook, her shoulders rising and falling with each shallow breath. The moment the ring touched her skin, she gasped. Her fingers closed around it tightly as though afraid it might vanish if she let go. For a moment silence stretched between them. Then with a faint and almost instinctive motion she twisted the band. The human leaned closer. He hadn't known the ring could move in such a way. The outer band shifted slightly, and as it did, tiny lines of light appeared. Engravings hidden for decades glowed faintly across the metal. Symbols in her alien tongue, sharp and elegant, revealed themselves like a secret written by fire. The old woman's breath caught. It is true. He left something behind. She read the words slowly, her voice shaking. If I fall, protect them. Her knees weakened and she clutched the stall for support. The human felt the words pierce through him like a blade. He had heard them before in dreams and whispers. Now seeing them carved into the ring, he realized they were real. The human frowned. Protect them? Protect who? The woman's eyes glistened with a new kind of fear. Our children, she whispered. Our blood. Perhaps not only mine, but all the children of our people. Her voice grew faint as though she were speaking to herself. He knew the war might take him. He left this message not for me, but for the one who would carry on his duty. The human's heart pounded. He clenched his fists, his mind racing. Then why me? Why would it find me? The woman shook her head. Because you are human. Because you were meant to see what others would ignore. My people, we would have buried it, prayed over it, left it in silence. But you, your kind cannot look away. You carry burdens that are not yours because that is who you are. Her words stung and comforted at the same time. The human felt both the weight of responsibility and the sting of doubt. Could he really take on the last will of a fallen alien soldier? The ring still glowed faintly in her hand, the markings burning softly like living fire. She turned it back to him, her eyes wet with both pride and grief. You should keep it, she said. If it guided you this far, then perhaps it chose you. Perhaps my husband's spirit has been walking beside you all this time. The human stared at her, shocked. But it is yours. It belongs to you. The woman shook her head. It belonged to him. And if he gave it to death itself rather than to me, it was because he wanted someone stronger to carry it. He wanted someone who could fulfill the message. The human's jaw tightened. His hand shook as he accepted the ring once more. The moment it touched his skin, the warmth returned, stronger this time, almost like a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat he felt something new, an image flashing behind his eyes. Not just the battlefield, not just the soldier. This time he saw children, small and fragile, hiding in dark ruins, their eyes wide with fear, their voices whispering for someone to save them. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving him gasping. The old woman noticed his reaction. What did you see? The human swallowed, his throat dry. Children, afraid, alone, like they were waiting for me. The woman's face paled, but her gaze grew firm. Then the message is clear. The ring is not just a memory, it is a guide. My husband died with one last command. Protect them. And now that command belongs to you. The human felt the crowd around them growing restless again, whispering about cursed relics and fate-bound humans. But their voices meant nothing. Only the weight of the ring and the woman's words mattered. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to return the ring to free himself of the burden. But the warmth against his skin told him there was no escaping. The promise carved into the metal was now his to keep. The old woman's eyes softened. Her tears still fell, but there was a faint light in her gaze now, hope. Perhaps you were not the one I wanted, she said quietly. But maybe you are the one he needed. The human said nothing. He only closed his hand around the glowing ring and felt its silent command burn into his soul. If I fall, protect them. It was no longer just the soldier's last words. It was now his duty. And deep inside, he feared the children he had seen in his vision were not just dreams. They were real. They were waiting. And soon he would have to find them. The human stood frozen, the ring glowing faintly in his palm. The words, "If I fall, protect them," echoed again and again in his mind. It was no longer just a carving on metal. It was a command that pressed against his chest like an unseen weight. The old woman's eyes stayed on him. She looked smaller now, fragile, her body tired from years of waiting, but her gaze was steady. It carried both grief and expectation. She seemed to be silently asking him, "Will you carry what he could not?" The human's throat tightened. He had never asked to be chosen. He had never wanted the responsibility of another man's legacy. Yet every step of his journey, every vision, every whisper had led him to this moment. He slid the ring back onto his finger. The warmth returned instantly, pulsing stronger than ever. It felt alive, as though the spirit of the fallen soldier had accepted his hesitation and was now demanding his choice. The market around them slowly faded from his awareness. He no longer heard the traders shouting or the clinking of coins. All he heard was his own heartbeat, fast, uncertain, but steadying with each second. He remembered the children he had seen in his vision, their small faces, their wide, frightened eyes. He remembered how real it had felt, almost like he could hear their whispers. "Please protect us." His fists clenched. He had saved strangers before. He had carried wounded soldiers from burning fields, shielded refugees from gunfire, and stood between innocents and monsters. But this was different. This was not just an act of mercy. It was a destiny carved into metal, binding him to the will of someone long dead. Could he walk away? Could he simply return the ring and forget? No, deep inside he knew the answer. If he turned his back, the whispers would never stop. The visions would haunt him forever. And worse, somewhere out there, children might suffer because he chose silence. The old woman placed her trembling hand on his arm. "Human, I am old. I cannot walk far. I cannot fight. But if my husband's last command has reached you, then perhaps you are the one who must answer it. Please promise me you will not let his words fade." The human met her eyes. They were filled with a lifetime of sorrow, but also with the spark of hope she had not felt in decades. He gave a slow nod. "I promise. I don't know why me or why now, but I will see this through. If there are children out there who need protection, then I will find them, and I will protect them." The woman's lips trembled. Tears welled again, but this time they were not only of grief, they were of relief. She bowed her head, whispering softly, "Then my husband's spirit can finally rest." But even as he spoke the words, doubt stirred in the human's chest. How would he find these children? Were they just a vision or real? And if they were real, where were they hiding? The ring seemed to pulse again, as though answering his questions. For a fleeting second, an image flashed in his mind. A broken settlement near the mountains, smoke rising from shattered roofs, and faint cries echoing in the ruins. His breath caught. It was not a dream. It was a direction. The human looked down at the ring, then back at the old woman. "It showed me something, a place, a settlement in ruins." Her eyes widened. "Then it guides you already. Perhaps that is where they wait." The human straightened his shoulders. The doubt did not vanish, but it no longer controlled him. A soldier does not always walk with certainty. Sometimes he walks with duty. He turned to leave the market. The crowd parted silently, whispering about the cursed ring, the widow's tears, and the human chosen by fate. None dared to stop him. The old woman's voice called after him, soft but filled with strength. "Go, human. And remember, the ring is not just a burden. It is also a bond. It ties you not only to him but to me and to all those who still live. Do not fail them." He paused for a moment, then gave her one last nod. "I won't." Then he stepped into the street, his boots striking the dusty ground with new purpose. The path ahead was unclear, but the decision was made. The ring pulsed once more, as if approving. "If I fall, protect them." Now those words were no longer the command of a dead soldier. They were his own vow, and as he walked into the horizon, he knew the true journey had only just begun. The human's footsteps echoed along the dirt road as he left the market behind. The sun hung low in the sky, painting the world in shades of orange and red. Dust rose with every step, and the faint glow of the ring pulsed on his finger, guiding him forward. Behind him, the old woman stood at the edge of the market. She leaned on her staff, her body frail but her spirit steady. She watched until he was almost out of sight. Her lips trembled as she whispered to herself, "Go, human, and carry him with you." The human did not hear her words, but he felt them. The bond between him and the widow was unspoken yet unbreakable. The ring was no longer just a memory of her husband. It was now a bridge connecting past and present, grief and hope, alien and human. As he walked, the vision returned. Flashes of children, frightened and alone, hiding in the ruins of a broken settlement. The sound of their soft cries pierced his heart. He clenched his fists. "I will find them," he swore silently. But even as determination filled him, doubt crept at the edges of his mind. Could he protect them? Could one man, even with the ring, fulfill the promise of a fallen soldier? He lifted his hand and stared at the faintly glowing band. "Why me?" he muttered under his breath. "Why not someone stronger, someone wiser? Why choose a broken man who has already lost too much?" The ring grew warmer as if answering. For a heartbeat, he felt a presence, not a voice, but a silent assurance. The soldier who once wore it was still there, standing with him, not as a ghost, but as a guide. Hours passed. Night began to fall. The stars lit the sky, distant and cold yet comforting. The human stopped on a ridge and looked down at the land ahead. Far in the distance, smoke curled into the air, faint but real, the same image he had seen in his vision. His chest tightened. The children were not just in his imagination. They were real. They were waiting. He began to descend, his boots crunching against gravel. Every step carried weight, not only of his own life, but of the legacy tied to him. At that moment, the old woman's story replayed in his mind, her husband's bravery, his vow, his sacrifice. He thought of her waiting for decades with no answer, living in sorrow but still standing. She was not just a widow. She was proof of endurance, and now, by carrying the ring, he was no longer just himself. He was a continuation of them both. The road grew darker. Strange noises echoed in the night. Shadows shifted among the rocks, and for a moment danger pressed close. But the ring warmed again, steady and bright. The human raised his head, courage swelling in his chest. He whispered into the night, "If I fall, protect them. That was your promise. Now it's mine." The words felt like a vow sealed in blood and fire. By the time he reached the foot of the mountains, exhaustion tugged at his body, but the sight ahead stopped him cold. There, in the ruins of an abandoned settlement, faint lights flickered. Not torches, but small fires, and beyond them, shapes. Small figures huddled together, trembling in the cold night. Children. The vision had been true. The human's breath caught. His chest ached with both relief and sorrow. Relief that he had found them. Sorrow that they had been left to suffer so long. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to frighten them. One of the children raised their head. Large alien eyes stared at him, wide with fear. For a moment, silence held the world still. Then, in the softest voice, the child whispered, "Help us." The human's heart broke. Without hesitation, he walked closer, his voice steady and gentle. "You're safe now. I will protect you." The ring pulsed warmly as if approving his words, sealing the bond between the fallen soldier's last command and the human's living promise. Far away, back at the market, the old woman sat beneath the stars. Though she could not see him, she felt the bond between them. She closed her eyes and whispered into the night, "Thank you, my love. And thank you, human. Together, you keep him alive." The human knelt among the children, offering them food and water from his pack. They looked at him with fear at first, but slowly trust began to grow. He smiled faintly, though his heart carried the weight of endless duty. "From now on," he said quietly, more to himself than to them, "you are not alone." The ring glowed one last time, brighter than before settling into a steady warmth. It was no longer just a relic of war. It was a living bond, and the human knew this was only the beginning of his new life. A life not for himself, but for those who needed him most.